Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on a source that isn't just profound, it's revolutionary.
It really is.
We're deep diving into Chapter 2 of the Gita summarized. It's often called the Yoga of Eternal Knowledge.
A fitting title.
And if you are looking for, the absolute philosophical foundation for transcendence, for duty, for how to act in the world without being just crushed by the results, this single chapter holds the entire architecture.
It's the pivot point. The entire text really hinges on this conversation. You see this move away from just pure emotional despair.
Right.
And for the first time, it offers a systematic understanding of reality. That's Sankhya, the analytical knowledge.
And then how to apply it.
The path of karma yoga.
We've got excerpts from this foundational chapter right here. And our mission really is to dissect this intense, crisis-driven conversation between the warrior Arjuna and his instructor Kṛṣṇa. We want to extract the core operating principles. How do you overcome emotional paralysis? How do you grasp the truth about your eternal self? This isn't just history class. This is an attempt to, internalize eternal knowledge.
And you always have to remember the setting. We can't stress this enough. We are not in a quiet ashram.
Not at all.
We are on the ancient battlefield of Kurukshetra. And this dialogue, it begins literally moments before the signal for war is given. Arjuna is facing, well, not nameless enemies. He's facing his own family.
His teachers.
His beloved grandfather. The crisis is immediate, it's personal, and it is profoundly moral.
Okay, let's unpack this setup. The narrative kicks off with Sanjaya, the narrator, and he's reporting that Arjuna is just immobilized.
Totally frozen.
He's described as full of compassion, depressed, tearful. This isn't just, pre-battle jitters. This is a total shutdown of his ability to function.
And this is so critical because Arjuna tries to cloak his paralysis in a kind of moral righteousness. He frames his grief as some kind of superior compassion. He looks across the field, and he sees two figures in particular, Bhima, the grand patriarch of his family, and Drota, his revered martial arts teacher.
The people he respects most in the world.
Exactly. And he asks, with total earnestness, how can he possibly attack men who deserve his deepest worship with arrows?
This is the ultimate moral nod, isn't it? He's taking his duty as a warrior, his Kshatriya duty, and he's setting it against his duty to respect his elders and teachers.
And he concludes in his own mind that preserving his personal relationships is the higher duty, higher than winning the battle.
It makes sense from a human perspective.
Of course. He argues that he'd rather live the life of a beggar than achieve victory at the cost of their lives. He sees any potential win, any kingdom, as being hopelessly.
Well, the words he uses are tainted with blood.
So it's not a tactical confusion, it's a deep existential fear that the means will completely corrupt the end.
That's it, exactly. He's projecting all the consequences and all he can see is loss. He even says he doesn't know what's better to conquer or be conquered because either way, the grief is still there. The cost is just too high for any reward.
It's too high, and the sheer weight of this choice is what leads to his total collapse. He realizes his own reasoning is just going in circles, endlessly. And that's why the next part, where he officially surrenders, is the moment the entire philosophy can actually begin.
He confesses he's confused about my duty, and this is maybe more telling, he says he has lost all composure because of miserly weakness. I want to stop on that phrase, miserly weakness. Why that? Why is he calling his own grief miserly?
Because grief, when it leads you to inaction, is a form of spiritual selfishness. It suggests he's hoarding his emotional pain.
Hoarding it?
Yeah, he's refusing to face a necessary duty, even if it's a terrible one. He's putting his personal sentiment, my confusion, my sadness, above the cosmic requirement, which is dharma.
So that's the miserly part, clinging to these temporary emotions instead of letting go and doing his job.
Precisely. And so the surrender becomes total. He declares, "Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me." He's completely accepting Kuma's authority, recognizing his own intellect has failed.
This is really the absolute requirement, isn't it, for receiving this kind of knowledge?
It is. Until you recognize that your current emotional framework is inadequate, that your cup is already full, you can't receive the instruction. Arjuna is basically saying, I've exhausted all my material arguments, now give me the spiritual truth.
And to really drive home the depth of his despair, he claims that no material reward, not even an unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven,
Which is everything.
could drive away the grief that is, and I love this phrase, drying up my senses.
Think about the scale of that statement. It's like saying, if you gave me absolute dominion over the entire planet and made me immortal, I still wouldn't be happy. Because this specific grief is just too consuming. It proves the crisis is spiritual. It needs a spiritual antidote, not political or material comfort. And that perfectly sets the stage for Kṛṣṇa.
Okay, so Kṛṣṇa's response is fascinating. And I have to say, a little jarring. The narrator reports that Kṛṣṇa addresses him while smiling.
Yes.
You'd expect, I don't know, a supportive hug, some gentle advice. But Kim delivers this sharp, almost insulting rebuke. Why the smile?
The smile is so significant. It's not cruel laughter. It's the smile of a wise teacher who sees the fundamental absurdity of the student's whole premise.
Okay.
Kant sees Arjuna grieving over something temporary while claiming to speak with wisdom. He knows the solution is, in a way, simple, even though it's incredibly difficult for Arjuna to grasp right now.
So the first thing Kant challenges is the nature of this emotional paralysis. He asks how these impurities have come upon you. And he notes they are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life.
He immediately reframes it. Arjuna's righteous compassion is now an impurity. Kṛṣṇa is telling him this emotional weakness is unworthy of his noble heritage, his position as a leader. It's a challenge to his very identity.
And then he gives a very practical warning, rooted in reputation and status. He says actions like this lead not to higher planets, but to infamy.
This is tactical instruction mixed with spiritual advice. Kṛṣṇa knows that a warrior who shirks his duty out of fear, or what he perceives as compassion, will suffer far more, karmically and socially, than one who fights according to Dharma.
So inaction is actually the greater sin here.
It is. The infamy would haunt him for the rest of his life, and maybe even across future lives.
The command is just unequivocal.
Yeah.
Do not yield to this degrading impotence. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy.
It's basically snap out of it.
Get up and do your job.
It's the shock therapy that's needed. Before the deep philosophy can be presented, the emotional paralysis has to be challenged forcefully. Kṛṣṇa has to break Arjuna's attachment to his own faulty reasoning.
But even after this intense challenge, Arjuna is still stubborn. He refuses.
He does.
He says, Govinda, I shall not fight. And then he just falls silent. And that refusal, after the sharp rebuke, proves that it can't just command him or shame him into action.
Exactly. This is what necessitates the deep dive into eternal knowledge that follows.
And this is where officially transitions from, I guess, motivational speaker to ultimate philosopher.
That's a great way to put it.
This systematic knowledge is called Sankhya Yoga, the analytical study of material nature and the soul.
And he begins by just destroying the very foundation of Arjuna's distress. Mourning. He is so direct. He says, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Yeah. He establishes the ultimate criteria for wisdom. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead.
That immediately reframes the entire war. Arjuna's worried about the temporary body, but he's claiming to be wise about justice and duty. Kate is challenging the fundamental premise of his sorrow.
Precisely. If we're focused on the body, we're missing the point entirely. So to combat this body-centric thinking, Gita introduces the immortality principle.
And this is the bedrock of the whole philosophy.
It is. The statement is just staggering. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be.
So he's immediately asserting the eternal individual existence of every single consciousness on that battlefield.
It shatters the illusion of a singular existence. Gita is confirming that we are all eternal individuals, past, present, and future. Death isn't annihilation, it's just a transition.
Which fundamentally removes the fear of ending someone's existence because the true self can't be ended.
Right. And to make that concept a bit more palatable, he uses this beautiful everyday metaphor of the change of bodies.
Ah, yes.
The change of bodies is compared to the continuous progression within this one lifetime. From boyhood to youth, then to old age. The person, you remain the same, but the physical form changes dramatically, cell by cell.
Right. I'm not the same person physically I was 10 years ago.
Exactly. So death is just the next final body change in this current lifespan. And the key insight here is a sober person, someone whose mind is fixed, is not bewildered by this change.
And I appreciate that the source doesn't just focus on the soul, it also acknowledges the temporary nature of our feelings. It compares happiness and distress to winter and summer.
The non-permanent appearance of winter and summer. They come, they go, they arise from our senses, and therefore we have to learn to tolerate them without being overwhelmed.
That concept of tolerance, that's the gateway to stability, isn't it?
It is. If you're constantly seeking happiness and fleeing distress, you're a slave to the seasons of the senses. Text 15 confirms that the person who can remain steady in both is the one eligible for liberation. Emotional maturity is based on this steadiness.
So the wise are those who have made this fundamental distinction between what endures and what doesn't.
Yes, the seers of truth have concluded that the material body, the non-existent, has no endurance. It's temporary, it fluctuates, it's destined to perish. But the soul, the eternal, has no change. It's constant.
So if you grasp that distinction, Kinney is basically asking, what precisely are you grieving?
Exactly.
Okay, so having established that difference, Kinney then moves on to give this almost technical, physical description of the soul's impervious nature.
He's demonstrating why it truly cannot be destroyed by anything Arjuna might throw at it. He starts by defining the soul as that which pervades the entire body.
It's the consciousness, the life force.
And it is entirely indestructible and imperishable. No one, not even the greatest warrior, has the power to destroy the soul.
And this analytical conclusion immediately brings the instruction right back to the battlefield. It turns the philosophical insight into a command for action.
Text 18 is the logical conclusion. Since the material body is sure to come to an end anyway, whether by an arrow, old age, or disease, the duty remains. Therefore, Arjuna must fight.
The decision should be based on duty and eternal reality, not sentimentality about a temporary form.
Exactly. And this leads to perhaps the most challenging concept for a warrior to internalize. The soul is neither the slayer nor the slain.
That feels almost counterintuitive to the reality of a battlefield.
It is, if you identify with the body. But if you truly know the soul is unborn, eternal, immutable, then the concept of killing, in the context of the soul, is meaningless. The arrows affect the outer garment, the body, not the resident self.
So the one who thinks they're slaying and the one who thinks they're being slain, both of them are just lacking knowledge.
They lack transcendental knowledge, which is why the famous garment metaphor is used here to make this transition a bit easier to grasp.
That's the perfect analogy for reincarnation.
It is. Just as a person sheds old, worn-out garments and accepts new ones, the eternal soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones.
We don't cry when we throw away a tattered coat.
So why would we cry when the soul discards a tattered body? The act of discarding the old body is natural, and it's necessary for renewal.
And the subsequent verses go into incredible detail, describing the physical immunity of the soul. It's like a list of all the ways the material world tries to affect consciousness.
It's an exhaustive, almost poetic list. It's designed to impress upon the listener the soul's absolute transcendence. The soul cannot be cut by weapons, burned by fire, moistened by water, or withered by wind.
He's systematically removing every possible physical threat.
Everyone.
Why dedicate so much time to listing fire, water, and wind, though? It almost seems repetitive.
Because these are the primal elements. They are the strongest forces in the material world. Kṛṣṇa is demonstrating that the soul isn't just resilient, it operates on a completely different plane of existence.
And unbreakable, insoluble.
Everlasting, unchangeable, and immovable. It is eternally the same. If the soul were a substance, it would be the most perfect, stable substance imaginable.
So knowing all this, that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, immutable, fundamentally removes any basis for grief over the temporary body. The philosophical argument is complete.
And yet, Kṛṣṇa is a thorough instructor. He offers alternative viewpoints, just in case Arjuna still can't fully internalize the eternal nature of the soul.
This is fascinating. He says, even if you insist on believing the less elevated idea that the soul perpetually takes birth and dies, there is still no reason to lament.
That's right. If you hold that cyclical view, that birth and death are unavoidable, like the sunrise and sunset, then why are you making this one specific instance a cause for paralyzing sorrow? The law of cause and effect remains.
One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death, one is sure to take birth again.
It becomes a cosmic statement of necessity. It's unavoidable, so wasting energy lamenting it is just illogical.
And Kṛṣṇa zooms out even further with the perspective on manifestation and annihilation.
He points out that created beings are unmanifest before birth, manifest only in the interim of life, and then they're unmanifest again when they're annihilated. It's just an endless cycle of temporary manifestation.
That really puts our brief, manifest human lives into perspective. It's just a fleeting moment in a cycle of unmanifest energy.
And then text 29 touches on the difficulty of internalizing this, despite its simplicity. Some look upon the soul as amazing, some describe it as amazing, some hear of it as amazing, yet many cannot understand it at all.
Because we're so strongly conditioned to identify with the body?
With the body, the senses, the immediate emotional reality, it requires a fundamental shift in perception, moving from self as body to self as eternal observer.
And the section concludes with that decisive final statement.
The one dwelling in the body, the soul, can never be slain. Therefore, Arjuna must cease grieving for any living being. The philosophical case for action is officially closed.
Okay, so Kṛṣṇa has now armed Arjuna with the knowledge of eternal existence, the transcendence, but now he has to make sure Arjuna actually acts. So he pivots directly into the practical necessity for action, this concept of dharma or religious duty.
This is the critical transition. Kṛṣṇa doesn't just let Arjuna retreat into passive contemplation. He uses the philosophical groundwork to enforce the immediate material duty.
And he brings it directly to Arjuna's role as a Kshatriya, a warrior.
He tells him that, considering his specific duty, there is no better engagement than fighting on religious principles. It's about fulfilling his role in the cosmic and social order.
And Kṛṣṇa paints this current situation, the sudden war, not as a curse, but as a blessing.
A huge blessing. He calls Kshatriyas who receive such unsought opportunities happy, because they open the doors of the heavenly planets.
Wait, hang on, I have to stop you there. This sounds like Kshatriya is using the promise of heaven to encourage fighting. Isn't that just replacing one material motivation, which was grief, with another material motivation, which is a heavenly reward?
That's a really sharp question, and it speaks to the layering of Kṛṣṇa's instruction. At this stage, Arjuna is still a materialist disguised as a compassionate person.
Yeah.
He understands social duty and material reward better than pure transcendence. So Kṛṣṇa first uses Arjuna's own framework, honor, and reward to ensure he acts.
I see.
Later in section 4, Kṛṣṇa will tell him to abandon all attachment to those rewards, including heaven. It's a pedagogical tactic. You start where the student is, and then you elevate them.
That makes a lot of sense. So Kṛṣṇa uses this worldly currency, honor, and status as the initial motivator. And the consequences of not acting are framed in the most painful way possible for a warrior.
Absolutely. Kṛṣṇa knows Arjuna is less afraid of death than he is of social humiliation. Text 33 warns that if he doesn't perform his duty, he won't just incur spiritual sins, he'll lose his reputation among men.
And this is where the socio-psychological tactic really comes in. Kṛṣṇa says that for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death.
Think about that. In any culture built on hierarchy and honor, death is a natural end. Dishonor is a perpetual living shame that destroys your legacy and your status.
Kṛṣṇa's making the pain of inaction, the infamy, more terrifying and immediate than the physical pain of action.
And he details the exact fallout. He tells Arjuna that the great generals who esteemed him will immediately assume he fled out of simple, naked fear.
We'll see him as insignificant.
That estimation of his peers, the swift fall from hero to coward, is a crippling blow to Arjuna's ego. Kṛṣṇa is showing him that his current path of compassionate inaction will just be universally interpreted as cowardice.
And then he delivers the final blow to his reputation. His enemies won't just defeat him, they will actively scorn his ability with many unkind words.
It's relentless. Kṛṣṇa uses every form of social pressure, shame from peers, infamy among the people, ridicule from enemies, to show that inaction is the only true source of loss here.
He's forcing Arjuna to align his will with his eternal duty by leveraging the temporary pain of reputation.
And once he's established the inevitability of duty and the high cost of neglect, he synthesizes this into the perfect win-win scenario.
Right, text 37.
It's pure pragmatic transcendence. He tells him, either you're killed, and as a noble warrior, you instantly attain heaven.
Or you conquer, and you enjoy the earthly kingdom you've earned.
So the action itself is protected. There is literally no loss from performing the duty. The only possible loss is failing to act.
Therefore, the only logical path is to fight with determination.
But this realization is the final bridge into the next section, into Karma Yoga. Keynes introduces the concept of equanimity in action.
This one sentence fundamentally changes the motivation. Keynes says, "Do thou fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by so doing you shall never incur sin."
And that is the true instruction. You have to perform the duty, but your internal state has to be indifferent to the results. Fight for the sake of fighting, for the duty itself.
And when you remove that attachment to the outcome, the happiness or distress of winning or losing, you transcend the karmic reaction entirely.
That's it. That's the art.
So this is where Kṛṣṇa shifts gears completely, right? He's moving from the philosophical theory of the soul, the Sankhya, to the practical technique for living, the yoga.
Text 9 makes that transition explicit. Kṛṣṇa essentially says, I just taught you the blueprint. Now I'm teaching you the construction method, the art of working without binding results.
And that is the definition of karma yoga.
It is. And the benefit of engaging in this method is described as incredibly secure. There is no loss or diminution in this endeavor.
And even a little advancement protects one from the most dangerous type of fear.
This is so key for the listener. Unlike material pursuits, where failure can mean total loss, spiritual endeavor is cumulative. You never lose the ground you've gained. And that most dangerous type of fear he mentions, it's not the fear of death. It's the fear of being bound again by the endless cycle of karma, of action and reaction. A little bit of spiritual consciousness safeguards you against that.
And the essence of this path is defined by a singular focus, which Kṛṣṇa contrasts sharply with the state of mind Arjuna was just in.
The definition of yoga at its core is equanimity in duty. Text 48 defines it beautifully. Yoga is performing duty equipoised, abandoning all attachment to success or failure.
Perfect balance of mind, irrespective of the outcome.
Exactly. And Kṛṣṇa then outlines the difference between someone practicing this and someone still caught in the material web. It all comes down to the quality of their intelligence.
The resolute versus the irresolute.
He describes two types. Those on the path of yoga are resolute. Their aim is one liberation, self-realization. Their focus is singular.
But the irresolute, the ones caught up in what he calls the flowery words, have an intelligence that is many-branched.
Pulled in a million different directions, constantly changing its mind.
And this is where Kṛṣṇa offers a very modern critique of distraction. The irresolute are victims of the flowery words of the Vedas,
which are often misinterpreted rituals or promises designed to achieve temporary ends. A good birth, power, heavenly planets, an opulent life, sense gratification.
So Gavins is calling out those who mistake the rituals for the entire spiritual goal.
They do. They focus only on the immediate material benefit promised by the rituals, ignoring the transcendent aim.
They say there's nothing more than this.
Exactly. They get so attached to these promises that their minds are perpetually bewildered by seeking more enjoyment, more opulence. In modern terms, it's like confusing a self-help guru promising quick wealth with a rigorous, sustained path of spiritual discipline.
It's all flash, no bedrock.
All flash. And the result of this attachment, Kṛṣṇa argues, is that their intelligence lacks the resolute determination for real devotional service. They're chasing fleeting experiences instead of lasting truth.
Their intelligence is scattered, like the many branches of a chaotic tree.
They can't focus on a singular goal because they're constantly distracted by the next shiny promise of material comfort or ephemeral power.
So the command is to transcend this mode of thinking entirely.
Advaita advises Arjuna to transcend the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, which govern these temporary dualities. He must become free from all dualities like heat and cold, pain and pleasure, and stop being anxious for gain or safety.
He must become perfectly established in the self.
And to explain why focusing on the true goal invalidates all these temporary promises, Kṛṣṇa uses the wonderful reservoir metaphor.
Such a powerful image.
It argues that once you have the knowledge of the ultimate purpose, the great reservoir, all the temporary aims, the small wells of ritualistic gains, they just become redundant.
Right. If the great reservoir of self-realization serves all purposes, why would you fret over the small well of a temporary good karma reward? The goal subsumes all the smaller goals.
And this leads directly to the core tenet of karma yoga, maybe the most famous and difficult instruction in the entire scripture.
The doctrine of action without attachment to the result.
Yes.
I think we need to spend some serious time on this because it's profoundly countercultural. You have a right to perform your duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action.
This is the definition of freedom in action. If you act because you're attached to the fruit, the bonus, the praise, the victory, then you become a slave to that external result.
If the result doesn't materialize, you're distraught.
And if it does, you're attached. and you have to act again to maintain it. It's perpetual bondage.
Kṛṣṇa provides two constraints here that are often overlooked. First, never consider yourself the cause of the results.
This is humility combined with philosophical realism. The results of our actions are not solely dependent on our effort. They rely on time, circumstance, other people, cosmic forces.
So by taking full ownership of the result, we inflate our ego and set ourselves up for disappointment.
We are merely the instruments of action. And the second constraint, which is so crucial for dealing with modern procrastination, is to never be attached to not doing your duty.
This prohibits intellectual laziness or a spiritual retreat.
It's the check against inaction. Arjuna's initial paralysis was precisely an attachment to not doing his duty out of fear. Kṛṣṇa says you must act, but act with detachment. You can't use a philosophy of detachment as an excuse for lethargy or withdrawal from responsibility.
He is so firm about the importance of detachment that he labels those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work as misers. That's a harsh term.
It is, because they're misers of their eternal potential. They're hoarding tiny, temporary material gains, the fruit, instead of working toward the eternal, limitless liberation that comes from detached action.
They're trading priceless gold for a handful of copper coins.
That's the idea. And the ultimate freedom then comes from engaging in this detached service, which Kṛṣṇa says rids you of both good and bad reactions.
This is the art of all work.
Normal work generates karma, good or bad. Detached, dutiful work, performed in consciousness, generates no binding reaction. Great sages, by freeing themselves from the results of work, break the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries.
And this section culminates in this concept of transcending the intellect itself, moving past the need for instruction.
Kṛṣṇa describes the state when intelligence leaves the dense forest of delusion, and you should really visualize this forest. A place of confusion, competing voices, hidden dangers, all those flowery words.
Right.
When intelligence steps out of that density, one becomes indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard.
So all the arguments, the promises, the philosophical debates, the rituals, they all just cease to matter because you've realized the fundamental truth.
Your mind stops being disturbed by the flowery language of temporary gain. Your intelligence, having found its true home, becomes fixed in the trance of self-realization. And that is the attainment of divine consciousness.
Okay, so Kṛṣṇa has outlined the philosophy and the methodology. And Arjuna, who's always the pragmatist, asks the ultimate question in text 54.
The ultimate practical test.
What does this enlightened person look like in the real world?
Exactly. He asks for the observable description of a steady sage, a sthita prajna. How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? If this state of consciousness is real, it has to manifest in behavior.
And Kṛṣṇa starts with the internal state. The sage finds satisfaction in the self alone.
Text 55 details the internal prerequisites. The sage gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification that arise from mental concoction. And crucially, the desires aren't just suppressed, they're abandoned.
Why?
Because the person has found a superior source of satisfaction, the self. They're not chasing external validation or pleasure anymore.
And externally, this internal shift manifests as perfect emotional stability, especially with the dualities that trip everyone else up.
He's not disturbed by the threefold miseries. Misery from your own body and mind, from other living entities, or from natural disasters.
And he's not elated by happiness.
Not at all. He's free from attachment, fear, and anger. This is the hallmark of the steady mind, the ability to remain emotionally level regardless of outside input.
He simply registers external input, good or evil, without reacting. He neither praises nor disguises what he obtains because his perfect knowledge fixes him above the ephemeral result.
And Kṛṣṇa uses a powerful image to explain how this state is physically maintained. The tortoise metaphor for sense control.
The tortoise draws its limbs within its shell. The sage is able to withdraw their senses from their objects completely and fix them firmly in perfect consciousness.
And this isn't just physical avoidance. It's the mental capacity to disengage the senses instantly. The sound can exist, the sight can be visible, but the mind refuses to travel out to them and engage with them for gratification.
They are fixed inward, in the self.
Exactly. But Kṛṣṇa immediately introduces a serious caution. He shows that this control is incredibly difficult. Even if you withdraw the senses physically, the taste for the sense objects remains.
This is the difference between forced abstinence and true liberation.
It is. A person might fast, but they're still craving food. The taste remains. Kan says you have to cease engagement by experiencing a higher taste. Only when the transcendent joy of the soul is experienced does the mind naturally lose its appetite for material pleasure.
And the risk of falling down is terrifyingly high. Text 60 warns that the senses are so strong they can forcibly carry away the mind even of a discriminating person trying to control them.
It's like a rogue wave hitting a boat that thought it was secure.
And that leads directly to the most important psychological sequence in the entire chapter, this precise 7-step path to spiritual ruin.
And this sequence applies perfectly to modern distraction, addiction, and emotional turmoil.
Okay, let's break down this downward spiral because it shows how ruin begins with the simplest act. It starts with just contemplating sense objects.
Right. It's not the action yet, it's just dwelling on the idea. You see something or hear of something and you contemplate it. And contemplation immediately generates attachment.
You get stuck on the thought.
You do. And that attachment, that lingering desire for the object, rapidly turns into lust or unfulfilled, aggressive desire.
And if that aggressive lust is thwarted, if the thing you're attached to is taken away or denied, what arises?
Anger. And text 63 continues the descent. From anger, complete delusion arises.
Delusion then leads to the bewilderment of memory. You forget who you are, what your duty is, what you're even trying to achieve.
And when that memory of your true self and your goal is bewildered, your intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, you're totally ruined. You fall down back into the material pool of suffering.
So the intelligence isn't lost at the end of the process, it's lost after the memory is bewildered. The real danger lies in allowing the mind to just linger in contemplation.
You have to catch the thought before it becomes attachment. That's the key. Kan emphasizes that even one roaming sense can be fatal. He uses the powerful sweeping wind metaphor.
As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water.
Even a single sense, if the mind focuses on it, can completely carry away a man's intelligence. It just shows how fragile our control is and how pervasive these material forces are.
So if the spiral begins with contemplation, the path to peace has to begin with reversing that process. Controlling the senses, but not through suppression.
But through freedom from attachment. Text 64 provides the counterpath. One must be free from attachment and aversion and control the senses through proper regulative principles. When you can use your senses without being enslaved by them, you obtain complete mercy.
And the reward for this is immediate satisfaction. In text 65, the threefold miseries of material existence just cease to exist.
And your intelligence quickly becomes well-established and steady. And Kan provides the negative corollary in the next text, emphasizing the absolute necessity of a connection to the divine.
If you're not connected with the Supreme, you can't have transcendental intelligence or a steady mind.
And without the steady mind, there is no peace. And without peace, there can be no happiness. The lack of peace we often feel is rooted in the lack of that crucial divine connection.
Finally, Kan gives us the definitive illustration of the sage's perfected state, the ocean metaphor.
This image synthesizes everything. The sage's mind is like the ocean. It is ever filled and remains still, even though rivers of desires incessantly rush into it.
The ocean just accepts the rivers without being disturbed, without overflowing, without losing its essential nature.
And the materialist tries to stop the rivers or frantically drinks from them and finds no peace. The sage simply allows the rivers of desire to flow into the mind without disturbing the internal stillness.
Only the person undisturbed by this incessant flow of desires can achieve peace.
The man who desperately tries to satisfy every desire that rushes in will never, ever find it.
The ultimate state of liberation, then, is summarized as living free from desires, giving up all sense of proprietorship, and abandoning the false ego.
This is the spiritual, godly life. And Guinness ends this instructional chapter with the ultimate promise. If one is situated in this consciousness, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. This entire discourse is the practical, moment-to-moment training required to ensure that final state is achieved.
Wow.
Yeah.
This single chapter has taken us on a massive journey. We moved from the emotional paralysis of Arjuna
Right, at the beginning.
through the absolute philosophical foundation of the eternal soul, the Sankhya, and then into the high-stakes, practical ethics of action without attachment, karma yoga.
The central liberating knowledge here is that critical distinction between the temporary body and the eternal soul. Once you fully grasp that, true strength is completely redefined.
It's not about physical combat.
Not at all. It's about the equanimity of mind, which is the definition of yoga. We learn that it is entirely possible to fight, to work, to live fully without being bound by the results of our labor.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener, navigating the dualities of a modern high-stakes life? It gives us a framework for handling the inevitable ups and downs, the happiness and distress, the loss and gain, by shifting the focus.
That's the key.
Instead of obsessing over the outcome, which we really can't control, we have to obsess over the quality and the integrity of the action itself. The duty.
And internalizing that shift requires a perspective so radical that it appears inverted to most people. Kia summarized it in that cryptic text 69.
What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage.
Think about that. The life of all beings is spent chasing material gain, satisfying these flowery desires, getting caught in that spiral of contemplation and attachment. That's their day. That's their perceived reality.
But to the steady sage, that frantic activity, that relentless attachment, is darkness, it's sleep, it's delusion.
So, if true wisdom means awakening to the eternal realities when the rest of the world is asleep in delusion, this raises one final provocative thought for you to consider.
If the material world's busy day is actually the sage's darkest night, what practical action, what routine contemplation, what small attachment to an outcome, what daily striving for a temporary fruit must you cease to be doing today to begin awakening to the knowledge that the world is currently treating as night?